My name is Rafo Núnjar. I'm from Peru, from El Callao. Um, this place is a museum, it's now a museum called Paccha. Paccha means sound of water. And Paccha is what we hear.
The river?
This little, yeah.
Oh, okay.
This is why it's called Paccha. But Paccha also is related to these places where people many years ago used to look for this sound, like to establish a bond and then withdraw songs from the sound of water. So this will be done before Carnival, so before February. And, but it's like a tradition that people don't do so much these days. But eventually all the songs that will be sung on the Carnival will come from the sound of water.
Wow.
So
that's beautiful.
This museum, it's about the traditional music here in the Andes. So the Andes is a geographical side of our country that is very diverse. So it's not the same South Andes, Central Andes, North Andes, and even in the South we have a large diversity of things. So I had the privilege to travel a lot inside the country, doing music, documenting music, trying to get some sounds, because originally I do sound healing, and that was my purpose at the beginning. But then when I never wanted to do the same things like everybody does, you know, like using the singing bowls or the quartz bowls or the instruments, because I knew here in the country would be like a ton of instruments that I could be used for that purpose. So I started like going a little deep into it, but then I got trapped in the traditional music, so I am more related now to traditional music than sound healing. I still do sound healing, but it's just that part, it's so interesting, it's so rich, it's so full of stories. It has to do with the weather, with the stations, it has to do with the movement of stars, it has to do with the celebrations, it has to do with the relationship between people and the mountains and the lakes and the stars. Yeah, so since in this journey I look for sounds, then I found things that were beyond sound. I found relationships with the universe. So that was something that really captivated me, and yeah, I'm still inside that. And I had a group of friends that we will get together to drum, like to have a drum circle. We got together in the basement, and the basement had a huge echo, like an echo I have never experienced again in my life. But there was a small room also in the basement, which was like maybe half of this room, and it will have like even a stronger echo, so that it will be like you will do like this and it will like spread the sound like all over. So it was like crazy. And since it was a basement, there was no natural light coming in, and since the house was abandoned for many years, there was no electricity there. So we got together and we were in the big basement, and we were talking about the ideas of doing this exhibit. So at some point the musicians, our musician friends, they got bored of this conversation, and they went inside a little room to play with their voices and their instruments and to improvise something. And it was dark, like pitch dark. And at some point I remember that in my backpack I had a pututo, which is a conch shell trumpet. And it was the first instrument that I made. And it's very loud when you play it. It's very small, and the smallest are even more loud than the biggest ones. So so when I heard that they were like playing inside, like I said, oh, I'm gonna go there with my conch shell, I'm gonna blow it, and this is gonna be so loud, like with all that echo, you know. So I went inside, and our friends were already playing some things there, and I could remember like the vibration of the sound was like doing this kind of like ring, like spinning inside the room. I think you could feel it even more strong because it was dark, so there was nothing you could see. It was only everything you could feel was through your ears. So I start like blowing, and when I blow, I immediately felt that my head was shaking. But then I said like, okay, it's okay. So then everything, like my body, like 1 or 2 seconds after, like my whole body was like shaking.
Wow.
Like if I was like, but I still like continue blowing, and it will sound like woo, woo, woo. And then something happened. Like it was like I was in a scene, and then in a movie, and then I passed to another scene, like a different scene with a different scenario. And in this other scene, I was in the night, and I was watching the stars, and it was the sky. The sky was full of stars. Like I've never seen so much stars in my life. And I was like, wow, like what is this? Like I didn't remember nothing before that. I was just there, and then like all of a sudden, like all the stars made a move in different directions. So one moved like this, and the other like that. And when they finished moving, they just made these patterns in the sky full of diamonds and squares, and so it was all geometric pattern, but made of stars in the sky. And I was like, what is this? Like, what the fuck is this? So my first question is like, where am I that this is happening? Like, so like when you're watching the sky, like your head is like this, and then I went down to see where I was, and when I looked down, there was nothing. There was no ground. I didn't have anybody. Like when you go down, you can see your legs and your arms, and there was nothing. I didn't have a body. So I was like, I thought I was dead. At that moment, I thought like I died. But then I said like, how did I die? I couldn't remember anything. So I was thinking like, what was the last thing I was doing before this? And then I remember I was in the basement. So when I remember that I was in the basement, I felt like something will grab me and pull me all over from this scene to this other place.
Back to the basement.
And I was back to the basement. And when I was back into the basement, I was laying down in the ground. All the friends that were outside of the basement were already in this little room, like playing and doing some things, like dancing or whatever. And people will still be improvising with the instruments. And nobody noticed that I fell or I passed or whatever.
Yeah.
So
the sound made it. The sound
yes,
took you
and I don't know how much time it
journey.
passed. So when I woke up, I was very scared because I couldn't move much of my body. So I said like, oh man, but I did die, like, or what? So I crawled into, I could touch like a wall, and then I sat there for a while until I could recover the movement of my body. And then I got up, and then I went out to have some air, to try to figure out what happened. And I told my friends, like maybe an hour after, but nobody was very interested in my story. So nobody put so much attention to it. But for the next couple of years, I had this, I could remember this scene where the stars would move and made all these shapes in the sky. And I was slowly getting obsessed with that. At the beginning of the second year, I said like, okay, I cannot continue with this. Like, I have to get some answers. So I started like doing a research, like asking people, psychologists, psychiatrists, all kinds of people that I could imagine that they will have some kind of an answer, but nobody had like a real answer that it will satisfy me. So at some point I thought like, okay, this happened in a place that has sound effects, it's dark, and this was all generated because of a conch shell trumpet. So where can I find all these three elements? So I started digging a little bit, and then I found out that here in Peru we have a temple in the central north coast called Chavin. Chavin is it's a temple that is 3,500 years old, and belongs to one of the most important cultures here. So Chavin people, they, in many parts of the architecture, they modify the sound. And all the sound artifacts that were found there, most of them, except for one whistle, but all of them were conch shell trumpets. And I started like digging a little bit more, and then I found out that there was an archaeoacoustic group from the Stanford University doing a study there, but it was related to the sounds of the conch shell trumpets in the architecture of Chavin. So
In this temple.
in this temple.
Okay.
That was very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
Yeah, the instrument itself, right?
Yeah.
So specific.
so. Of course, that would increase my obsession.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So there's still this website where all the research and what they did, because they built very specific microphones to register how the sound will spread through the architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an email, and I said like, okay, like what I have to lose, you know? I will write to this email and to tell the same story that I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 month after, I got a reply. And so the person who replied was the archaeologist who was in charge of the project. And she said that she was very interested in my story because of when I described the first time that I got inside this and I felt this ring of sound that it was like vibrating in the architecture. Mm-hmm. And he said like when there is a specific part in Chavin where we play the conch shells at the same time, you can feel exactly that. So if you ever come to Chavin, visit me.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I said like, what? Okay. So at that moment, I was so obsessed with this that I learned that in Chavin, this was maybe the only archaeological site that so many conch shell trumpets were discovered at the same time, and most of them were carved. And I said like, you know, I never carved anything, but I want to know how it feels to carve. So
To create the instrument, right?
not only to create the instrument, but also to make designs on the conch shell.
Uh-huh.
So I started like trying to figure out a way of doing it, and then I did. I did 2 of them, and so I put one of them on Facebook and I said like, oh, I'm selling this one, and a lot of people wanted to buy it, and then a family from Huaraz, which is like the big city, the closest city to Chavin, they said like we wanna buy it, and maybe we can find in Chavin, so you can give us the pututu there. And I said like, oh, okay, this is a great plan. So I'm gonna go meet these people, sell the pututu, and then meet with the Stanford people.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there and I did all this and met this great family that they pretty much adopted me back then. And then I met the Stanford people, and they told me many things about what they found related to the sound, the conch shells, and the architecture. So the place where this ring sound vibration happens, it comes from the oldest structure in Chavin, the oldest one exposed, because there's a lot of underground tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're older, but the one exposed is where you feel this. And in this rounded plaza, there is like this stair made out of stone, but half of the stone is like black stone, and then the other one is white stone. And then this goes into a pavilion, and this pavilion goes into a chamber where there is the main god of Chavin, which is like a 3-ton stone that is carved, where there are descriptions of many kinds of things. And there is a small window, like in the upper part of this deity. And when it's the June 21st and December 21st, the sun goes into this small window and baths with light this stone. So this small pavilion that goes from the stairs into this chamber where the deity is, they say like the sound of the conch shells doesn't change there. So what does this mean? When we do a sound with our voice or with anything, the sound, the vibrations will travel, the frequencies will travel, and then they will bounce into the different objects and surface, and this will make the the sound to change. Um, so the thing in this pavilion is that it never changes, which is physically impossible because it always has to change because it's always moving.
Mm-hmm.
But they have put microphones everywhere in the temple, and this is the only place where that doesn't happen. So it's a big question mark because they don't know what's the purpose for this, or if this was on purpose. But since it's such an important place that goes into the main part of the whole temple, and it's the only place in the whole structure that just happens this, the most evident thing is to think that they made it on purpose. But they don't have enough evidence to say that it was made on purpose. But why, they don't know, and how, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they did it. So there's got to be something there,
Okay.
but we still don't know.
Wow. But is it the temple, was it made by Incas or is it pre-Inca?
Oh, it's pre-Inca, very, very old.
Okay.
And the other thing is also that these conch shells, they grow in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So they come from very far.
Mhm.
So, and you don't find this in the beach, like you have to dive into the ocean. And so it's something very exotic for this Andean part, even if you think about that 3,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
even more. So,
3,000 years ago, someone brought those ones to the temple,
yes,
and they had a reason, right?
yes.
And we don't know that. We can only assume what kind of
we
reason.
can speculate,
It was.
Yeah, I think those are important questions because you can have an idea of the effort people did to get them in the
Mhm.
first place because the ecosystem for these conch shells, like well, the snail, it's 20 or 30 meters under the water, so they have to dive a lot into
They
the
even
dark.
had to dive.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So back then, there was people specialized in diving, and still, like for many generations, there were people like specialized in diving and getting this animal.
Mm-hmm.
So then they will take only the conch, they will cut it, they will polish it, they will carve some designs, and the designs will have some meaning, and then they will take it all the way until the central Andes of what we know now as Peru.
Mm-hmm.
They will blow the conch shells, and they will offer it there, and they will bury it into another pavilion that they discovered like 20-something years ago. And it will remain in that pavilion for 3,000 something, because they come from the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
They come from under the water.
Yeah.
And then the final destination was under the ground, also in the darkness, but in a different way.
Yes.
The other thing that is important to have in mind is that this temple was very different to any other, because the original constructors, they made it like at the encounter of two rivers. So when they finished the whole construction, they moved the river so the river will go under the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And they made all this architecture so the sound of the water will spread across the whole site. So if I think about it, like when they buried these conch shells, there will be sound of water.
Mm-hmm.
So this was closely related to water, all this
Mhm.
temple. And of course they come from a place where they come from the ocean, they come from water.
Mm-hmm.
And they were put to rest in a place that it's, in a temple that it's dedicated to sound and water also. So there's a very symbolic and a lot of parallelism there.
Mm-hmm. Synchronicities.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Okay.
where it comes from the origin and the destination, you know, it's like they're saying
Mm-hmm.
it's different but it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So you think it was like some kind of a celebration and offering?
Probably, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Probably it was some important celebration that it will happen inside the temple and also in this circular area where originally it was the sound effects where they will be sensed like the most. So yeah, this was something very important. And maybe after they sounded there, that was the end of the purpose of doing this. so they were offered for the site. Yeah.
Okay. And how this idea of blowing the trumpet began? Do you know? Okay.
What we know is that this idea of blowing a conch shell as a trumpet, it's not only from here. It's also in Mesoamerica, it's also in India, in Maoris, in New Zealand, so there's also in Japan, it's also in the Tibet, so it's everywhere. Yeah.
Wow, it's fascinating that so many years ago, so many communities and people and countries just found out the same idea, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And in all of these places, it's something very important, something sacred. For instance, in the India, I think it's Vishnu, the one that has many arms. In one of its arms, it holds this conch shell. I think it's in the Bhagavad Gita where it says when blows the conch shell, it gives shape to the universe. Like the universe is materialized through the sound of the conch shell. So yeah, in Mesoamerica, I know it's one of the ways of describing Quetzalcoatl, which is this important deity in Mesoamerica. It's a conch shell with feathers. So that's one representation of Quetzalcoatl. I think that was the beginning for me. Like, you will see just a conch, and then I found there was so many things behind that then I will do the same questions for other instruments, and then I will find a lot of stories behind them. And I was like, okay, like it's a never-ending cycle, like wherever you go and you find something and you start like digging a little bit, you're gonna find more and more and more, and it never ends. Yeah.
So basically, we can say that it's possible to have like a psychedelic experience because of the sounds, right?
Yes.
Well, the psychedelics.
It is possible to have
use of the instruments. Wow.
Let's put it like this: like psychedelics, they activate different areas of our brain and our neuronal network. So we can do the same with sound. And our brain has two sides, like left hemisphere, right hemisphere. They do different things. Usually our left hemisphere is more active because it's like the most rational one, and because of the society we live in and the way we have been educated, we are more driven, rational people, logic people than intuitive people. So if you get to reduce the amount of activity in that hemisphere and increase the activity in the other hemisphere, you can get experiences that feel like psychedelic experience. Because your brain, your neuronal network is stimulated in different areas. So it leads to see different things, have different perspective, have a different approach, have new ideas, sense new things that you usually don't. So it could be like closely related, and probably this is why these sounds are used in, or used to be used in these places where the architecture was made originally to have these very distinctive sound effects. Now that you say this, in this circular plaza that people used to play conch shells, there is evidence that they will take psychoactives there.
Really?
Yeah.
So they mix it up, like the psychedelics and the sound experience?
Yes.
Okay.
So it will go together. Yeah.
And it was how many years ago? Remind me.
3,500 years ago.
Wow. And it's proven, really? It's proven?
Yeah.
That is crazy. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if this is the oldest. I don't know if this is the oldest, but it's pretty old. So maybe we can imagine that there is that's the thing here. There is, when you find something that is old, a few years later you find that that wasn't the first thing. It will come from something that was oldest.
Yeah.
And it's always like this, like a few years later, oh yeah, that's not the oldest. There's something oldest.
Yeah, we know so little, right?
We know
so
so
much,
little.
but so little.
So when I was a kid and I would go into the school, I was taught that this culture was pretty much the oldest culture. But now we know there was an even oldest culture 1,000 years before that one. So this is a very little world, which is very exciting at the same time.
Wow. And the thing that, wow, it was like 3,000 years ago,
Yeah, I
and
know.
people already like combined psychedelics and music, and they knew what were they doing, right? They knew that. They had awareness and ideas. It was freaking I cannot comprehend it, really. Amazing.
Long after that, but still a long time ago, people will still do it, but in different areas. Like this is like in the Andes, but in the coast, it will happen something very similar. This is what we can find nowadays because we don't know what happened back there in the jungle, which is like harder to research.
Yes.
Because of there's not much now evidence. Maybe we'll find that in the future. But
From the jungle.
From the jungle.
Okay.
But the jungle is being very active in all kinds of aspects of life, including music, sound, and psychoactives. So, and they are still. But I don't know, if we imagine how it sounds something 3,000 years ago, I don't know, like, what can we discover from that? And if we ever do it. But yeah, I think at the end we just see like the big part of the iceberg, like that other part that is so huge is still in darkness.
I know.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. I'm fascinated myself. Wow.
I know.
That's crazy.
When I learned all these things like some years ago, I couldn't stop like doing questions. So I tried to look for people who can give me some answers, or maybe I start like buying books and reading, and yeah. So it is very deep. It's very beautiful. It's still alive in some parts. So yeah, I can see now, like if I see back in time that I'm dedicating my life to this.
Okay.
Yeah, most of my life it's like going into this direction now.
Okay. That's beautiful. Go for it.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Maybe let's go back to how it began for you and how it ended up in Urubamba.
Okay.
So you were fascinated by the trumpet and by other instruments. You talk with people. So how did this idea of creating that kind of space here in Urubamba came for you?
I wasn't thinking about creating a museum. But before living here, I used to live in Paccha, which is another sacred valley. In the sense that it's a valley, but there is a lot of archaeological places also there. And I lived there for 6 years, and at the time that I will do a lot of traveling, and then I will pick up like most of the instruments that I have, and I will live inside this land that I will have like a main gate that was like right next to my house. So, and I had neighbors inside the land and some other houses. So when everybody will go and visit all these friends, they will have to pass like right next to my house, and my living room had a window, and they will always see that there was full of instruments. So sometimes I will run into people, and they would tell me like, "Hey, how can I do to get into the museum?" And I said like, "What museum?"
Oh wow!
And I said like that one, and I said like, "That's not a museum. That's my house." But I said like, "If you want to visit, yeah, you can come in." And people will come in, and they will ask me for what is this and what is this and what is this, and yeah, I will start like telling the stories. So how did I get here? I wasn't planning to be here actually. I got trapped here in COVID.
Oh yeah, we talked about this.
Yes, so but I was in Cusco, and I was supposed to be here just 4 days, and I am about to be 5 years now.
Wow.
So
okay, so you got stuck here.
Yeah, I got stuck here, but I lived here in 2010. So I had a lot of friends here. I knew how life was here. I always liked the Urubamba, and when COVID hit, I thought, since I got trapped in Cusco, I thought maybe this is a better place to be than Lima, and it was. Eventually, I moved here to Urubamba. I stayed here. Then, when I had the opportunity to return to Lima, I went back, brought some of my stuff until I figured out what I was gonna do, and then at the beginning of 2021, I decided to move here and brought all of my stuff.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, when I had all of my stuff, I rented a house, but I saw I couldn't all my instruments there because it wasn't so easy to put them there. So 4 months later, I moved to another house that I saw that it would be more easy for me, and it would be more closer to the center of Urubamba to put the instruments and to display them as a museum. So yeah, that's how it started, because I wanted to have the opportunity to talk to people and to tell all of these stories, and to transmit this fascination that I have for music and tradition and sound into people. Like sometimes we just hear something and we don't know what's behind that, and there's a lot of things behind that. And I love to find out what's behind things. So sometimes people, they don't have the time, or they don't know how to reach to these stories. So yeah, I can do it for them.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I just like to share the stories. I'm seeing now that as I am getting old, I am the one that has some of the stories. And yeah, I like it. I like that. Yeah. Sometimes I have some kids that come visit, and yeah, I give them the instruments because this is a museum for people to try things.
That's amazing.
To
You can
touch
actually have a
things.
contact with them.
Yes, because I love museums also, but sometimes,
Do not touch.
yeah, it's like so frustrating. Like I don't want this space to be like that. So kids come here and play, and they just like open to explore so many things. And when I tell their stories, and sometimes there are crazy stories, they're like, what? And it's like, okay, I can identify with this kid because, yeah, the first time I heard this story, I felt like that. So I love to transmit that. And sometimes, yeah, adults are also like that. So yeah, I like that. These stories are entangled with some magic, with something that you will always wonder, like, is this real, or is this like a myth or something?
Yeah, like a fairy tale.
Or like, yes, and I think there are many stories that are in between. So and people they have a lot of questions that I cannot answer. So, and I don't mean to answer everything, because sometimes the beauty of it is to
Not knowing.
not know.
Okay.
Not knowing is beautiful also. The mystery is something beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And the stories that you are talking about do you know them like from other people, or okay?
Sometimes
Just like mouth to mouth.
Sometimes from other people, mouth to mouth. Sometimes not necessarily from the same geographical area, but someone that I met in somewhere. He told me a story. Sometimes in books, sometimes in the celebrations, like the traditional celebrations. There are a lot of things that happened before the party itself and after the party. So I love going there. I love those parties, but I have also learned that it's just not like for partying. There is a lot of purposes for that. So I've also learned that it's very important to go before the actual party, because of the rituals and the intentions people have and what they do. So there is another layer of knowledge there. So that's something very beautiful also.
Okay.
In some communities, we have the barayos, which are the leaders of the community, the authorities of the community. And the barayos, the main leaders, they go with some kid, and the kid will be like an assistant. and this little kid will be carrying the pututu. So if at some point you want to be part of the political life of this community, it's required that you have been playing a pututu since you were a kid.
Really?
Yeah. So it has a symbolic aspect, you know, like it's related to authorities. Another thing is like we have in Pisac there is like this traditional mass on Sundays, like in the Catholic Church, and the authorities they come also with their kids, and the kids are like carrying the pututu.
Okay.
And in this moment of the mass, where the priest is turning the wine into the blood of Jesus and the bread into the body of Jesus, that's where the authorities, not the kids, they play the pututu. So it's symbolizing transformation.
Okay.
Something is transforming into another thing. It's just when I was telling you about this story of Tupac Amaru, when he was going to be executed and he will be after buried, and people will play the pututus when he will be buried, because he will be transforming. He will transform into a living human being. He will transform into an ancestor.
Wow,
So,
I love it.
And this is very important because the ancestors, like they will have an important part of the living. So there are celebrations still for the ancestors. And of course, when it's transforming, the sound that is going with this transformation is the sound of the pututu. Then,
so it's also played on funerals? When
yes,
someone is
sometimes it's played on
very,
funerals. Sometimes it's played when people are making an offering, and that offering is put into the fire.
Okay.
And that's also being transformed.
Yes.
That's where the pututu sounds sometimes.
Okay.
For instance, now in February in Chincheros, there's going to be a celebration called Ingeraje. They run through the limits of the communities, and they're fixing the roads there. But in between in all this line of the limits of the boundaries of the community, there are little amounts of soil, and they symbolize the apples that they have relationship
Mountains.
with.
Okay.
Yes, and when they do this, they're like running the whole day. So they put a small offering for the mountain, the apple they have a relationship with.
Okay.
And when they do that, they play the pututus also.
Okay.
So they're like symbolizing, like they are saying hi to these mountains. So these little piles are like fractals of the big mountains. And they are like going all the way to say hello to all of them during one day. So there is also another story in the Spaniard Chronicles about Nailam. Nailam, it's a mythic character that founded the Chimu culture, which is a little earlier than Incas, but it wasn't in the Andes, it was in the north coast. And it is said that they came with rafts coming from north, and then they established in the north coast of Peru. The main two characters were a couple, Nailam and his wife. And then the next character that will be an authority, it will be the trumpeter, who will have a concert. And the name of this trumpeter is Pita Sofi. So there is always, this sound is always related to authority, transformation, you know, and it's still like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you play it for us?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So this is I think this is the one that started everything for me.
Yeah, because we went to the temple, we talked to people.
Yes.
We got to know the instrument.
But also it's very alive, so that's something important. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically from the sea.
Yeah.
So it's not even made, right? It's just a treasure from the sea
It is.
that makes a sound.
Yeah.
But no human made it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, in a way, it's like you describe it. It's like a treasure because you have to like dive into this dark
Yeah.
ocean and look for it until you find it. Although I think it's very different nowadays. Like people, they still dive, but it's not like it was like thousands or hundreds years ago. But still something very important.